working? Okay, cool. I'm just finicky with these things. I don't know if... Just make sure I don't dance around, right? Okay, well, evening family. Let's start by reading our passage. If you can just turn to Proverbs 4. We'll be reading from 10 to 19. And this is obviously a passage that I'm sure you're quite familiar with. I trust that as we read through it with God's perspective. Proverbs 4, verse 10 to 19. It says, "Hear, my son, and accept my words, that the years of your life may be many. I have taught you the way of wisdom. I have led you in the paths of uprightness. When you walk, your step will not be hampered. And if you run, you will not stumble. Keep hold of instruction. Do not let go. Guard her, for she is your life. Do not enter the path of the wicked, and do not walk in the way of the evil. Avoid it. Do not go on it. Turn away from it and pass on. For they cannot sleep unless they have done wrong. They are robbed of sleep unless they have made someone stumble. For they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. But the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, which shines brighter and brighter until full day. The way of the wicked is like deep darkness. They do not know over what they stumble." So, this is the sixth paternal appeal of Proverbs. And actually, I made that statement because it makes my sermon sound a little bit more fancier. But this passage really does lay out just a father addressing his son. It's almost like he's taking him aside, saying, "Son, look, I think it's about time we had another chat." And so perhaps the son is sitting down and he's anxious, he's eager to hear what his father has to say to him. And so we start out with verse 10. It says, "Hear, my son, accept my words, that the years of your life may be many." Could the father be trying to convince his son to follow his instructions by telling him, "You will live longer," right? That's the sales pitch, the trade-off, the bargaining chip. I mean, did that not cause your ears to perk up to some degree? Saying, wait, what is it that what is it about heeding his father's words will increase the years of his life? Right? Sounds like the beginning of an Indiana Jones adventure, right? In the search of the whereabouts of the Holy Grail, or something like that. But what is the secret? Is it drinking a glass of water first thing in the morning? Every morning. That's a Japanese thing, I've heard. Is it a new diet? Or maybe it's just as simple as, don't run with scissors. Don't die. What is it about the father's instruction or counsel that magically adds years to a life? I mean, you'd want to know, whatever it takes to live longer. What we find instead is that it's no secret. In fact, the key to statistically living longer is seemingly more mundane than we think. Look in verse 11. The father says, "I have taught you the way of wisdom and have led you in the paths of uprightness." The father essentially tells his son, look, it's nothing new. It's nothing new. In fact, you have been practicing this with me all along, bro. You see, morality generally gives you a longer life because, what does it do? It keeps you out of trouble. See, now that the father has taught him in wisdom, he reveals to his son that there are actually two ways in which people live in this world. Firstly, there's the path of the upright, which is morality, wisdom. And then you have the path of the wicked, which is immorality, foolishness. And it's quite obvious which path the father is on, right? He's on the path of the upright. He's walking it himself. So this is what it's like, son, to be on the path of the upright. Verse 12 and 13. When you walk, your step will not be hampered. When you run, you will not stumble. And he says, keep hold of instruction. Do not let go. Guard her, for she is your life. The Father speaks of a confidence that comes about when you act morally. And isn't this so true? I don't know what you encounter at work or university or school. But I don't know if you've ever encountered being in a situation where you're tempted to practice unethical practice. And maybe you've toyed with the idea, but then you say, no. I'm a principled man. I'm a principled lady. I'm a man of principle. And you decide not to. Right? There is a sense in which you walk away with confidence. Although you know that morality doesn't necessarily grant you direct benefit, but you still feel good about yourself, right? You just feel there is a sense of there's a universal good and universal justice that has occurred. And this is actually satisfying. I mean, even people outside of the church feel this way. They may not know exactly why they feel this way, but they do. And it feels good, so they do it, right? Verse 14 and 15. Do not enter the path of the wicked. Do not walk in the way of the evil. Avoid it. Do not go on it. Turn away from it. Pass on. Now the Father begins to talk about the way of the evil. Perhaps the Son has been naive until this point. It's like a Lion King. When Mufasa takes Simba on Pride Rock, and he shows in the kingdom, and he says, everything that the light touches, son, is our kingdom. And then, Simba starts walking to the corner of the Pride Rock, but he sees in the distance, and he says, Dad, but what is that shadowy place? What about that shadowy place? See, in the Proverbs, the father could be deciding now, let's reveal to my son what is in the shadowy place. But more specifically, what are immoral people like? What are these wicked people really like? Verse 16 and 17. For they cannot sleep unless they have done wrong. They are robbed of sleep unless they have made someone stumble. For they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. See, his description of these people is that their behavior is destructive. It's not only destructive to themselves, and even though they might not think so, but it's destructive to others. But is not the danger here that we only categorize wickedness by actions alone? Not to say that evil actions are not serious, but that's certainly not exactly or primarily how God characterizes a person who is wicked. What the proverb accurately points out is that there is a deep evil that lurks before they even do evil. I mean, it says they lose sleep over it. They lose sleep over it not because they are warring with their desires. They lose sleep because they are eager to carry it out. They're trying to find opportunity to carry it out. Time is wasting. It's like kids. Oh, well, I know certainly for myself. When you know the next day you're flying out to, on a plane or you're going on holiday, how do you sleep that night? How do kids sleep that night, right? You can't sleep. You're so eager. You just want to be there. You want to be there today, already. The wicked not only have this desire lurking inside, but they have their fill of it. They have their fill of it when it's carried out. They scoff down the bread of wickedness. They gulp down violence. There is no remorse, only a primal desire to satisfy their urges. Wow. Horrible, isn't it? What terrible people. It is. It sounds horrible. Now Proverbs continues in verse 18 and 19. It almost takes us a bird's eye view of what has been talking about, or what the Father's been talking about. Verse 18 and 19. It says, but the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn. Okay? The path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, which shines brighter and brighter until full day. And then, on the other side, but the way of the wicked is like deep darkness. They do not know over what they stumble. So does that brief run through verse 10 to 19 give you a good idea of the two paths? Their consequences enough for you to make a good decision for yourself? I mean, let's weigh up the two options if you're uncertain. If you pick the course of the upright, morality, then you might very well live a little longer. And at least things might look a bit brighter and brighter. It may not be entirely bright, to be fair, but at least you'll feel good about yourself at the end of the day. And also, at least you might just be able, you have something just to back you up before God if anything happens. It's a fail-safe, right? Or on the other hand, if you pick the path of the wicked, immorality, then you'll most likely stumble a few times. Business deals may fall through, right? Business ethics. It's good for business. Maybe you don't like sketchy business because that's just not too lacquer. You lose good friends and family, even lose church family. And life does tend to become a bit more miserable when you're all alone, doesn't it? I mean, who loves being a friend to a liar? A serial killer? So go on. I'll give you a few seconds. Make a decision. Decide what kind of life you want for yourself at the end of the day. But most probably I don't have to give you a lot of time because it seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it? Who wouldn't want to pick the path of the upright, seeing that the proverb seems to promise maybe at least a better feel-good life, a life that you could be prouder of at least? And so a lot of us have made that decision already, haven't we? I want the path of uprightness. And so now we labor, and we keep ourselves on the straight and narrow. And perhaps you've been doing a pretty good job at it so far. But tell me this. While the proverb was describing the character traits of the people on the path of the wicked, those who practice immorality, what was your knee-jerk reaction? Did your response tend towards feeling even a little chuffed, just a little chuffed with yourself? Maybe you said, "Whew, at least I'm not that bad, right? At least I'm not that bad." But friend, if this describes just something of your response, then I fear that you do not see your folly. You are him, her of whom this proverb speaks when it says, the way of the wicked is like deep darkness. They do not know over what they stumble. How about the second test? Or what about your response to the opening of the proverb in verse 10? Did your ears perk up mainly because you heard the words, years could be added to your life? Then friend, I fear still that you do not see your folly. You are him, her of whom this proverb speaks when it says, the way of the wicked is deep, is like deep darkness. They do not know over what they stumble. Can't you see that everything about this kind of wickedness is selfish, self-centered? We use everything to our own ends. We manipulate things to our own ends. It looks good. It's the I must thrive kind of mentality. Or even, how about this? Something a little subtle. I just want people to like me, see me as a great person, enough to hang out with me. You know, this is candy coating to a deep lurking wickedness that you don't even recognize yourself. Is our choice to live morally all about looking good among men? Avoiding, escaping hell, or even just doing it well? That's what the Bible says. And in fact, that's just what I'm used to. I mean, I grew up doing that, and that's just what I'm used to doing. In fact, it's good for me to belong to a community, especially a Christian one, right? Because people are nicer there. People generally get along in Christian communities. In fact, the Christian community is a great place. It's conducive to a healthier family life. How about that? How many of us are mostly here for just a sense of community belonging? And our morality is just the ticket in. Is this what all immorality is about? It serves our selfish purposes. In saying that, I hope that you're wondering at this point, and perhaps you're saying in your mind, this doesn't sound very Christian of me, right? But if we're honest, Ryan, if walking the path of uprightness or morality is not for self-advancement or self-preservation, to impress people or community or a church, or an attempt to appease God so that I can escape hell, which is still self-preservation, well then, for what other possible reason would anyone have to even want to live morally? Why? You see, the real purity in living a moral life hugely depends on the why you live the moral life. It's the why. Why do you choose uprightness? Why? It's our tendency to read these passages or verses about the straight and narrow and the path of the upright and fail to see the relationship foundation on which these instructions are given. Look at the passage. This advice is not coming from some elderly man who wants to strike a conversation with some random boy eating an ice cream on the bench, right? And it doesn't come from a fortune cookie spewing out sayings to any person, to a guy who has extra change and he feels like he wants to waste it on, I don't know, what he thinks is an authentic Chinese treat. Huh? Fortune cookies are not, it's not Chinese, by the way. I don't spend a lot of my cooking time writing wise sayings and finding where I can shove it. Right? Put in the broccoli, surprise. Remember that this passage is undergirded by a deep-seated relationship that exists between a loving father and a loyal son. So why is it so important for us to first understand this before we even start reading passages about living morally? Allow me to explain, just with this one analogy. So my dad wasn't the greatest dad, but he still spent enough time with me, for me to appreciate him as a father before he passed away. Now, my dad was a civil engineer. He studied to be a civil engineer. And I studied to be a civil engineer. The difference is that he studied at Wits, where I studied at UJ. Calm down. Okay, we'll save that topic for another sermon. But eventually, my studies did bring me to Wits because of a unique course that they offered. But man, this course was hard. Lots of late nights. I was studying and working at the same time. And there were definitely times where I felt like I just wanted to quit. But the one day, on the first floor, I don't know if anyone has been to Wits, the civil engineering department, but on the first floor they have, when I was walking through the hallways, and the walls are lined with photo frames containing, which have class graduation photos for every year since 1922. And that immediately got me thinking. I'm thinking, wow, wait. Could it be that that my dad's photo is hanging in one of these frames? So between classes, I'd run up and down, trying to think, wait, when did my dad graduate? I was trying to work things backward. He failed a year, but eventually I found it. 1979, Dennis' son. The only Chinese guy in the whole entire class, standing in the corner of the photo. You know, that at that moment, despite my struggle, my studies at Wits took on a whole new meaning. Took on a whole new meaning beside me just getting my next degree, my credentials. I mean, I was saying, wow, wait, at that moment, I was, wow, my dad was walking these hallways. And you know that lecture hall I was just sitting in, my dad was sitting there. And most probably he was also thinking, what the heck is this guy talking about in the front, you know? So one of the things that now brought me back to to Wits, as hard as it was, every single week, was because in some way, me walking those hallways, me sitting in that lecture hall, I just felt closer to my dad. This is who my dad was. This is who he was. My walking there had relational value now. It wasn't just about just me anymore. In the beginning of this passage, when the Father says, "Hear my son, accept my words, that the years of your life may be many," I can almost imagine the son saying in his mind, he's like, Dad, what? Surely you do not think that dangling longer life in front of me would be that thing that entices me to follow you in your steps, that entices me to follow your morals. Dad, I follow this path because you are on this path. I walk these hallways because you walked these hallways. I sit in this lecture hall because you sat there. What moves little boys to want to put their small feet in the footprints of their father when you're walking the beach? What is it about that? I can almost hear the son saying, "I want to be with you," so much so that hypothetically, even if you change paths, I would follow. It's about the Father. You see, family, the value of the path is not the path itself. The value of the path is the Father who has been there. You see, God is not representative. He's not employed by morality. Morality is a representative of God's character. God is not a representative of the no-lying policy, but honesty is who God is. We don't live a life of morality for morality's sake. We walk it because morality is who our God is. You know, it's so funny how a lot of people who have met my dad look at me and they say, "Well, man, just the way you think, or the way you talk, the way you carry yourself, even the way I sneeze." So, like my dad used to do the thing where he used to look into the sky and then to try and get a sneeze out. I don't know, but I've done that ever since, and I find it works. But when you love God, how can you not want to mimic him in his traits? Now tell me, where in this whole explanation, this whole analogy, did you hear anything about self-advancement, self-preservation, credentials, good standing among society, or even reputation in the church, or earning a right standing before God for yourself? Where did you hear that? Nothing. Nothing. Everything that must drive our living a moral life must be because I am my Father's son, or I am my Father's daughter. Not I'm trying to be my Father's son, as if I have to earn it, but I am. This is who I am. I want to put my little feet in his big shoes. In fact, this is actually what verse 18 means when it says that Christians will shine brighter and brighter until full day. Christians will slowly resemble more and more the morality, the character traits of God. Can anyone really help but not look more and more like the one they adore? Can you help that? So you might be saying to me, okay, good, Ryan, you've spoken to us about the two paths, okay? And that we've got to choose, right? And then you've spoken to us about why we walk the path of uprightness if we choose the path of uprightness. That we want to mimic God. But something's missing. Why would I want to mimic God? How is it that I could love God that much to want to mimic him? What is the key to that? Family, friend, I'm so glad you asked. Because think about this. And tell me if this does not at least intrigue you somewhat about how wonderful God actually is. Just listen to this. God the Son, Jesus, had the sweetest relationship with God the Father, so much so that throughout Jesus' entire life on earth, and because of his affection for God the Father, he fully submitted to all that his Father lovingly instructed him. Why? Why would he do that? so that he could take the place of the rejected, the discarded, those who had no hope of ever enjoying the fatherly care of God. Christ sacrificed his own intimate standing before God as the rightful son just so that you and I could finally know what it's like to be under the affection of a loving father. We were those orphans standing behind a glass window, watching at a distance a beautiful father-son relationship play out without any hope of ever experiencing ourselves, without any hope of us bringing ourselves into that relationship. But now, because of Christ's death, he's choosing to take the place of the rejected. God could now purchase us and make us his own, so that we could admire him in this relationship enough to want to hop in his footprints along the sand on the beach, so to speak. Christian, walk the hallways of uprightness. Put your little feet in the footprints of your Father, our God. Not because it earns you anything, not because it is your ticket to staying in the Christian community. Do it for nothing else but for adoration. And for those of you who desire that kind of relationship, how do I get there? Who desire that kind of relationship with God but don't know how to be brought into it. Speak to the person next to you, or find an elder. Speak to the deacon. Or even speak to myself after the service, but do it, because there is good news. There is such good news for you. Finally, family, be moral. Choose uprightness, yes, but only because you walk it out of love for him who saved you. But I'm struggling. Christian, be assured that if you keep your focus on Christ and you adore him, find him in the scriptures, find him there, then you can be sure that you will shine brighter and brighter. You will mimic him more and more until full day. Let's pray. Lord, there are so many reasons why we need to love you, why you deserve our love. You deserve our affections because you've shown us that affection first. You've proven yourself worthy to be praised. And so, Lord, in our walking, as we choose daily, even this week, to be moral, to be outstanding, that it's not just for ourselves, Lord, but it's just because we are so amazed at who you are. We want to be like you. I pray, Lord, that you constantly, Spirit, help us in this. Help us to be more like you. And help us, if we're struggling, I pray that you help us to find you, to see you clearly in the scriptures. And let that fuel our desire for morality. Let that fuel our desire to mimic your character traits. Amen.